and they just can't afford it. The story that I heard was during the campaign was I met with some Teamsters, and one of the women there told me that her rent went up 100% in 5 years, from $1,000 to $2,000, and that both her and her husband work, and they have children, and that she was scared, embarrassed, and then she got too ashamed. And when she got too ashamed, I said, what do you have to be ashamed about? You're both working, you're doing the best you can. And she said, I just feel like I should have known that I was going to need to be better prepared. How do you know? How do you know that, right? 2/3 of the people that live in our area are spending more than 30% of their income on rent. And that means they don't have enough for food, they don't have enough for mental health issues, they don't have enough for clothes. I mean, and you see it all. So I know I'm speaking to the choir. So I have I'm working with former Senator, currently Mayor Steinberg in Sacramento. They're doing an incredible job with the homeless, by the way. They have a huge issue, but they're doing an incredible job. And you'll remember, I believe it was Proposition 2 this year that provided funding for mental health homeless. And so I'm carrying the bill that will provide an opportunity for the development of mental health facilities for the homeless. In particular, housing, and it's a no place like home is the acronym or the what it's called, no place like home, which is to get them into housing as quickly as possible. Many times communities will discriminate against the mentally ill, and so my bill would set up an expedited process and utilize a process that's we already have in place. And then I'm also working on I don't know if you just paid your tax, but hopefully you just paid your taxes. Or hopefully you did your taxes. But there's not much good that came out of the tax reform or the tax bill. But there's one thing, and that one thing is a creation of what's called opportunity zones. And opportunity zones are it is a designation in the federal tax code that provides an opportunity for people that are very wealthy and have lots of capital gains to put their money into opportunity zone funds that can be used to build housing and economic development opportunities in the poorest census tracts in every state. And that puts in place $7 trillion of economic worth that would be privately invested into these opportunity zones. In California, we have 379, and they are the poorest of the poorest zones. And if you know anything about development in California, you know that it's very difficult to build anything. Well, the program has a sunset in 7 years. So we got to get them started and pull down that money. But we're competing with the rest of the country, which can, like that, build housing and businesses and generate the opportunity zone opportunities in a much quicker fashion. If you've ever tried to do any development in this state, you know that you can't get anything done in 7 years, even if you start it right now. And so what my bill would do is create an expedited process to be able to pull down that money and to be able to start doing what we need to do in some of these. And what it is that there was an expedited process. It pulls right out of the bills that were developed for stadiums and arenas. It's an expedited CEQA process. You have to go through CEQA, but it's an expedited review. Judges have a real short period of time to look over if there's a challenge and to determine whether CEQA is valid or not. So that's my opportunity zone bill. I'm very passionate about it. Worked on it last year and just couldn't get it completed. There's a lot of opposition to anything having to do with expediting anything, but it's all local government control, but it's the kind of thing I think we're going to need if we're really going to make investments in poor counties.
Right. And Supervisor Phillips, I wanted to ask you, how are our county supervisors responding to this issue, and what specific actions are you taking?
Well, housing, both the people are right, that we need the state to know that housing issues and homeless issues aren't just for the big cities, that we have the same problems here. And housing here, we really want to do it our way rather than have the state mandate where our housing is going. And Monterey County housing is complicated because you have farmland, ag land that you got to preserve, or our biggest $8.1 million industry depends on having that land. And we're foreclosed some places from building because North County, for example, we have a moratorium on new building because of the water issues. And then especially farm worker housing. The cities don't like to have farm worker housing in their jurisdiction. We got a little exception going on in Greenfield now, but I mean, they want to have them in the county, and out in the county, you don't have the infrastructure, especially the sewer, to give them. We're working with the city of Salinas trying to accommodate that. And I think one thing I have done is, I think the relations with the city of Salinas is better than it ever has been. So, like what Anna was talking about, the homeless out in Laurel, the city and the county for years have been bashing each other. Well, the homeless is your problem. They're in here. Well, no, you have the health department, you have social services. So finally, the mayor and I got together on a Saturday morning. We walked down to where the public defender's office was, across from the post office, and we said, let's just cut through the bullshit. And we'll use that. We moved the public defender out the next week. We made that, and then we went out and looked at Laurel, and that's what we did. And so there's a lot of things we could do better if the city and county is working together. We're working on a project out off of Russell Road, trying to bring the sewer line into the city of Salinas, and that will accommodate the farm worker housing that we're looking at. I went and met with the head of the Coastal Commission in San Francisco, so he maybe gets the door open and we have less challenges than we have in the past. We're looking about redoing the community plan in Castroville because it's so expensive to build in Castroville, and there's a lot of infill that we could do in Castroville, and we have the water there and everything, but it's the fees are exorbitant, and so we're trying to make it easier and better to build and cut through the red tape, because if we don't do it and do it in a proactive way, but there's plenty of people, especially in Monterey County, that want to fight anything you're doing. I mean, he's got a bill saying give us $17 million for a fish screen so we can do the tunnel, and we want $17 million because the Fish and Wildlife, they put the bass in there, and we're trying to do a tunnel, and they put the white bass in there. And they said, well, we don't want them to commingle. We didn't put them in there, you put them in there, but they're not paying for it. We're trying to get them to pay for the fish screen, which is $17 million. We got people opposing, from our own county, opposing us getting $17 million so we can do the water, and if we do the tunnel and the spillway, which is about $35 million, we can, they think the tunnel will add an additional 66,000 acres of water that we desperately need. It takes 9,000 acres to run the whole peninsula about. And this is 66,000 acres there. So we're working on that. I mean, it's one of the priorities that we have is farm worker housing. I mean, you look at, we're the model in some respects for farm worker housing. TNA went up quick. Nunez went up quick. We're looking at Alderetti's doing their project. It doesn't have to be, as someone mentioned, it's not just farm worker housing, it's the workforce at all levels, you know. And we're doing some interesting things, like there's a fellow that wants to build a modular house building plant there, and they're doing that a lot more in Europe, where they build in a modular line. You think about, you're on an assembly line building these boxes that go together, and you're not out there in the rain waiting for the plumber to come after the electrician, things, and they build those. You saw them down off of Chinatown. They went together like blocks, and we're doing them out in Castroville, except right now, the only ones that can work on these, they're built in Boise, Idaho, and the only ones that work on them is you have to bring him in from Boise. So this would be a big thing, and the reason they're looking at that location off of Russell Road, not too far off of Sala, is where they're looking at, because he would be close to the freeway with all the building that's going to have to go on in California, and it's pretty innovative. And I got to say, just while we're here, it is helpful for me as the chair of the board. By the way, and on the Laurel and the homeless thing that Anna was talking about, we went and looked at that location, and finally one of the city councilmen was taking all this flack. I mean, his citizens were just ripping this board down. So I went to the meeting and I said, well, yeah, don't blame him. It's me and the mayor that decided that and then pushed it to the other ones. I mean, so he didn't do it, and his one vote didn't make any difference because I didn't think it was right that he ended up taking all the flack for it. But we looked at Laurel. There wasn't any resident area right around it. There wasn't any business district around it. It was close to the hospital and to the sheriff's department and social services and the health department and everything else. So it completely made sense, and any decision you're going to make is going to upset anybody. We had a big issue that came before the board where they wanted to put a church in Kachawa, and a bunch of neighbors came and wanted to fight the church, and Simone Salinas leaned over to me and says, I can see a homeless shelter, but people coming and getting rallied up about putting a church in their neighborhood. So, but just as a reflection, it's really helpful being the chair of the board, especially this year, and having a good working relationship with our legislators here. And both of them I've known. Robert used to come when you were with Simone and come to meetings we had at the ranch. And Anna and I worked together for years and years. And then when I was building Rancho Cielo, she was one of the first people who I asked to come on my board. So, and they have an open door policy, so that they're interested. What are the issues locally? What do we need to focus on? So it's really helpful to have a couple legislators like this in our neighborhood.
Great, thank you. Okay, we are moving on to the topic of immigration. Many of the people that our nonprofits serve are undocumented and are in great fear of deportation. And they are a vital part of our community and economy. Assemblymember Rivas and Senator Caballero, besides California declaring itself a sanctuary state, what is the state's strategy for protecting immigrants' rights? And what is your position on this issue, and what are you doing?
Well, let me just say that the last legislative session, we passed a whole number of bills in response to the federal government's actions, is the best word I can say. Don't get me started talking about that stuff, because I'll just go on and on. But so let me tell you that part of what we were trying to do is to allay the fears of, I went to a number of big town hall meetings. I'm talking about 300 or 400 people in schools, and it was very difficult to go because people were there with their families. And walking in, the kids wanted to talk to me and to tell me how fearful they were of going to school and not knowing if they came home whether their parents would be home when they got home. And so it was very emotional. But the key at the very end was that we had the sheriff there, we have somebody from the DA's office, and then my electeds, and at the end somebody said, so we want to know if we're out working in the fields whether we're protected because it's private property, and the answer is no, right? Immigration can go anywhere, even the kind of most sacred places like the courthouse. They have certain rights, and in the end the question was, well, that was the question, and then the response to us was, then what you're telling us is you can't do anything. You can't do anything. So we're fair game. And that was a very painful moment, because the reality is you can't thwart the federal government. You can set up some rules and try to slow down processes and protect. But the reality of the situation is that they pretty much can go anywhere they want. And so what we did is we passed the sanctuary state rules that said no local government officials will cooperate, use their authority to cooperate in doing immigration apprehension, detection, or detention, right? And so the key there is the big place where that's real easy are the jails. And so a lot of what was happening before was that information was passed on to immigration in regards to people that were placed in the jail that were undocumented. And so some of that has been a challenge, because we do want those individuals that are criminally convicted to be gone. I mean, that's the bottom line. I think all of us would agree that if you're convicted, not if you're accused, if you're convicted of a crime, and you're undocumented, then you need to leave. We don't want you here. And that having the distinction between just people that are arrested or people who are in some kind of custody, that you don't want that cooperation. So that was really important. Really important in terms of having the community know that we appreciate immigrants and that we understand that they're here to earn a living, and we don't agree with some of the rhetoric that's been used that negatively portrays why immigrants come or who they are when they come. But the other part of it was that, we passed rules that said that undocumented workers could get a driver's license as long as they did certain things. And so we've got data, fingerprints, photographs, and addresses on all of the undocumented workers that have obtained a driver's license. And so we took action to protect that information, to not share it with the ICE in particular, Homeland Security. Now the devil's in the details, because we share all that data with them on a regular basis in terms of our database systems. And so we're working at making sure that though we protected them, that they're really protected. We also passed rules about allowing students that were here undocumented to be able to go to college and to be able to get back to us, grants to go to college. I'm thinking in Spanish. I had to do it. I was like, yeah, back to us. And so we have all their data too. We have their photographs and their fingerprints and everything you need to do in order to be able to access that kind of benefit. And so we took action to protect them as well. So we've been going through this process to make sure that we're not inadvertently giving information that can then be used against people who we really wanted to protect in the first place. And I believe this year we're going to be moving to try to close the gap on the last group of Californians that don't have health insurance, which is to include undocumented workers. And that's still working its way through the process. It's going to cost us, and we got to figure out how we're going to do it, and then what kind of data we need to protect, because if we do include them in the system, then we need to protect the data as well. I ran a bill, well, actually two things. One is I ran a bill last year to protect immigrants from immigration consultants who rip them off, give them bad information, and who actually can prejudice their right to stay in this country because they filed the wrong papers. I got it all the way to the Senate, and it died in the Senate. And I think the same bill is being run this year by an assembly member. We'll see what happens to that. I also was a co-author on a bill that would have set up a process where we would put together a committee from the state of California to negotiate with the federal government to protect undocumented workers that are working in agriculture and the service industry. So that kind of regardless of what's going on in the rest of the country, let's figure out what works in California and try to see if we can negotiate with the federal government. And that bill was never allowed. We were allowed to have